Hello and welcome to Warped Miniatures. Here on the channel today we're going to be doing a competitive vlog, but specifically a competitive vlog about this list here on the table. This is the third iteration and it's been a long time running to finish this off, but the reason being is I usually don't like to finish off each list and what I'm about to say about it until I'm about to go to another tournament, and I have not been able to get to another tournament in a long time. I've had a lot of family issues pop up right before I've been signed up for a lot of these tournaments, so bad news out of the way, good news. We're going to be getting to a tournament here soon. That's why we're doing the list. So for this list video today, we're going to do part one, advice about you as a player. Like always, something that you can bring to the tournament you're going to, or just competitively speaking for yourself, that can help you a little bit and give you some bonus points. Part two is going to be about the units themselves. So the Redemptor, the Invictor, the Thunderstrike, the Chaplain, the Captain, the Intercessors, and the Stormtalon in the back. Each one's going to get a little bit of a strength, why I like it, why it's in the list. And part three is going to be about target priority for ourselves as a player. What's our strengths and weaknesses? What is our deployment priority? Who gets to get placed first and where? And also stratagem priority. What are those precious CP going to be spent on? And how are we going to utilize that as an overall strategy going forward? But wasting no time, let's get right into it, and we'll be right back here. Okay, the first item we're going to talk about to give yourself bonus points as a captain on the tabletop is going to be this little planner here. This planner is great in a lot of different ways that you wouldn't realize at first. Not only is it a place to jot down your thoughts, but it also has a handy dandy calculator, as well as a place to put your pen, so you don't have to just be searching for one or the other. Let's say you have the pad but you don't have the pen, and now you're not taking the note that you wanted to jot down really quick. And this game is about a lot of quick actions and thoughts. If you can see here on the left, this is a place for my deployment priority, so I can flip it to the next page or a blank page and get a part to write something down really quick. But if I need to also look really quick, oh, I need to be placing this unit next. I can operate in two different wavelengths. You can kind of separate your thought process. You don't have to solely focus on deployment. I can jot down, oh, his most expensive unit is this guy. His toughest unit per point, or most or least efficient per point, that he's putting a lot of extra bonus points into this unit, which I don't know why, but I know that he did. That gives you a little bit of information that you can remember later on. That's just something random, but this guy can help you a lot. And last but not least, the other item that I want actually to talk about, one is deodorant. If you don't remember to put deodorant, and this is like planning the night before and the day of, get your stuff ready. Don't wait to the last second to find your belt to the point where you, or another one is your belt and deodorant. Don't waste those opportunities to the very last second and then either forget and say fuck it, walk out the door because you don't want to be late. And then the whole day you're fucking feeling self-conscious because everyone's smelling your dirty ass. Or the belt, where the half the day you're just sitting there holding up your pants and you can't focus on the game, or and looking like a fool. So two things easy to forget just because you're focused on the game. Plan to set yourself up for success the night before. Get those things ready. Get yourself an outfit. Don't come in looking like a slob. What you protrude as a general is how the rest of your army is going to come through. So if you come in looking like a slob, your army is going to look like a slob. You want to exude that, and if you don't, then it's going to show, and they're just going to start the battle already one up on you. So set yourself up for success, get yourself ready the night before, and let's get into the unit overviews. Okay, so let's waste no time and get into the first unit that we want to talk about for this list, and we'll finish up some quick thoughts on this guy because we kind of finished the last video talking about him. But the Gravis Captain with the heavy bolter is an awesome option. On his data sheet alone, he's got a great skill set with his melee profile, his shooting profile, as well as just his durability. And I need that because I'm not sure if I want to put a lot of extra CP and points into him, making him a chapter master, or giving him warlord traits or relics, or if I want to just keep him bare bones and just be an objective holder for me. Right now it's kind of 50-50. Some maps I'm going to be wanting him to truck with my Redemptors and save some CP and not do Wisdom of the Ancients. Some maps I'm going to want him to be solely objective holder on maps where there's a shit ton of objectives. For now, I want him to be flexible, and he has that alone just in his data sheet. And bonus points for Super Doctrine, when he's in his Tactical Doctrine, he gets to get rapid fire all the time, let alone the bolter roll, and giving him an extra AP, so 2 shots at a 36-inch range, strength 5, 2 AP, 2 damage is pretty decent with the Successor chapter trait of rerolling one hit roll, almost and hitting on twos, almost always guaranteeing you're going to get both shots and an above average chance to wound on anything infantry related. So great unit, loves data sheet, not put anything else extra into him, just in case we want to use him as an objective holder, because it's only 105 points. But let's get right back into the next unit and be right back here. Okay, so getting into the next unit, and my personal favorite addition to the list lately is the Primaris Chaplain on Bike. This bad boy is 115 points. He is a 14-inch movement beast. He has the turbo boost keyword, allowing him to get 20 inches with an advance. He automatically, and it allows him also to get access to that keyword of a -1 to hit. I forget what it's called, skilled riders, I believe. And he has a great melee weapon without his mantra of strength litany that I picked for him, or the extra litany to give him a +1 to wound in melee. He also has a relic called the Armour of Indomitus, giving him a 2-up armor, 8 wounds, with a once per game 3+ invuln. So if you get him turn 1 with a 20-inch turbo boost, well, actually, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. That's in the late game deployment strategy. This guy's awesome. Talking about him as a list, 115 points. He's efficient as even just getting a forward objective as an objective holder, or just using him as a missile torpedo, fuck some shit up in the enemy's backline, front line, whatever you need. He's a Swiss Army knife to the fullest when it comes to the beat stick variant. But that's it for him. Let's get into the next unit here. We'll finish up the infantry with the Intercessors next. Okay, the Primaris Intercessor. This is the last infantry unit we'll be talking about today. It's a very points efficient unit. It has a 10 wounds at 2 wounds a model at 10 points a wound. It has T4 toughness with a 3-up armor, 2-up armor against shooting if you're touching light cover, which is pretty easy to do even if you're on an objective, at least with a 2 or maybe even 3 of them, giving you a lot of great rolls against a lot of shooting, requiring your opponent to either come closer or waste extra shooting on them that they don't want to do. These guys are great for objective holding, particularly in my list, but my concern with them, and what I'll be looking at them to see if they maximize, is am I getting any points back out of them through the shooting? Do I need to get points out of the shooting for them? Is 100 points enough, or is it too much to rely on objectives? Or should I be putting in some whirlwinds instead, which will guarantee me not only a tougher unit to peel off the objective, even though it doesn't have an objective secured, a strength of these guys, but typically I'd rather have my opponent just drop in more points or dedicate a 5th of their army to kill it off, or maybe a 6th of their army compared to, you know, an 1/8 of their army when it comes to just shooting off intercessors, compared to a whirlwind, which you're going to have to put a lot more points into to get through that 11 wounds T7 toughness. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, you can put transhuman on these guys and make them even tougher, but that is my big question right now, is their points, and am I getting the points back out of them? But that's the Intercessor. Quick thoughts about them. Very points efficient, and primary role right now is the very first drop in deployment, and that is my most backfield. I will hold, hopefully, till the end objective. Don't plan on raising banners, just hopefully getting some extra shooting out of their 36-inch range Stalker variant, heavy variant weapon for them. But -2 AP, 2 damage, -3 AP in the Devastator Doctrine. Not bad, but they're the ones I question most out of any other unit in the list right now. But let's get into the next one and be right back here. Okay, so this next guy is one that we've actually already talked about a little bit in the previous videos, but this one is going to be the Thunderstrike Storm Speeder. This one is my sleeper pick for a lot of lists that I don't see people utilizing after the points drops. This guy is the bread and butter that is not these guys. So these guys will probably be in my list moving forward, competitively speaking, until some big thing changes, i.e. the codex dropping and a lot of units getting shakeups. The 3 Invictors, 3 Redemptors, those aren't coming out of my list. Those are staples. They've been in almost all of them. No matter what I change, these 6 don't come out. Lately, at least 2 of these are the same story with my Thunderstrike Storm Speeders. They just mesh in with those Successor chapter tactics very, very well, and overall that's why you're going to see them in the list for this particular combat list in mine if you follow the channel. They're just very good overall. They got a great skill set. I already went over that in kind of other videos, but the big reason why I like them is the heavy weapon long range firepower that's reliable. Reliable on its own, it doesn't need any rerolls of any sort from a support roll, and it doesn't need extra movement It doesn't care about any movement penalties. I can pretty much place them wherever I need to behind cover, obscuring, and then fly them on the other side of it and get line of sight shooting, even with this new heavy terrain bias that you're seeing with the guidelines that GW is kind of like recommended, and a lot of local tournaments and GW run, even in the States now, tournaments are kind of adhering to. But I agree, I think the game needs a little bit more terrain. Turn 1 armies just like mine are getting out way more strength than they should, I think, in the game the way it should be played. There should be the opportunity for turn 1 armies to competitively, if you're playing, just rock off the other team if they misplace certain units, and you should be able to punish your opponent just as much as if I placed badly against the front line with my Thunder Strikes and the opponent was able to get a turn 1 charge as a melee army. There should be both opportunities for that. That's why the game is so great. It's, in my opinion, the hardest game to play on the fucking planet Earth. I mean, there's no game that's more complicated in so many different facets, not just from theory crafting units and your own list against opponents and evolving metas, and not just global but local. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts, and that's what makes it great. But I'm not sure how I got into this rant. Thunderstrike Storm Speeders, they're fast, they're damagey, they're independent, and they're flexible, and they're the bedrock beyond these units. But we'll get into these units next, and this is the actual bedrock for everything that we run. Okay, so getting into some of the big staples of our list that have been in there since almost the very, very beginning is going to be the Invictor Tactical Warsuit. The only one that supersedes this as being in my list longer is the actual Redemptor Dreadnoughts, which we'll talk about here in a second. The Invictor Tactical Warsuit has been one of my favorite units to play with. It's very flexible with that rapid redeployment and its concealed positions, stratagem, and ability mixed together. It allows you to not only instill a immediate urgency in your opponent that they must deal with this, or at least respect it. If I throw it right up in the middle of your deployment, 10 inches or 9 inches away, and I have a 10-inch movement with this guy, that's, hopefully you asked or I just tell you so you can understand that I'm guaranteeing a turn 1 charge if I'm doing it 9 inches away from an enemy. So that's, if you don't take care of that, not only am I going to rock off around average 20 shots with all this above average light fire, it's also going to have 5, rerolling 1, strength 12, I think it's actually strength 14, -3 AP, 3 damage hits, where I get to reroll 1 of them. On average, I'm going to get 3 of those to actually hit you, and at least 2 wounds. I mean, you're going to be winning 2s on most stuff, so you got to respect it with the rapid redeployment. But unless I'm actually using that rapid redeployment, which we'll talk about later, I want to now focus these guys in more of a secondary acquisition role. I want them to help guarantee me, and primary acquisition role, but I want them to help me guarantee victory points out of these guys. I want them to not just be a turn 1 throwaway and force my opponent to deal with them. Yes, they have that potential, and they have done that to great effect in a lot of games, tournament games, not just casual, but in very clutch scenarios where they just came through against a Dark Angels player. They were the number 1 player for me. One I put in the middle, he got wiped, but the other 2 were able to kite his infantry, because that 10-inch movement is greater than their Terminators, and I was able just to shoot off and then charge at the very end and wipe out the last couple. So they're dynamic, they're flexible, especially with that stratagem, and they're great for killing infantry. They're our number 1 choice to kill infantry in this list. The Redemptors, which we'll talk about in a second here, are above average in killing infantry. The Chaplain is above average in killing infantry. The Stormtalon is above average in killing infantry, but none of them are the best. This guy is the best, not only just my list, but one of the best for killing infantry in the Space Marines list. You just get a lot of freaking shots with this guy. So, Invictor Tactical Warsuit, staple, he's been in there since the beginning. Okay, so let's get into one of the big staples of all of my competitive lists as an Ultramarine player, and almost all of my casual lists as well, just because he's a lot of fun to play with, and I love reading about him, painting them, and even playing with them in video games. They're just great characters for the 40k universe. The Dreadnoughts are awesome. This guy right here is a Primaris variant. Gets a little bit different bells and whistles than a standard variant. One of the biggest is that he's twice the height. It makes it a little bit, for better or worse, viable for shooting and hitting stuff, but also more viable to getting hit because he's bigger. A little bit harder to move around on the table because he has such a big base, but he does have an 8-inch movement. It's above average. I mean, your Intercessors are 6, so that extra 2 inches does come into play, but he is bulky, meaning it's hard to run all 3 of them in a pack at all times. It's going to be even harder now in the future with this new meta guidelines for terrain. So we're going to need to be very thoughtful on how we place him in deployment, but also be mindful that he is the most expensive unit in our list. At 185 points, the Icarus Rocket Pod comes in handy. I like that extra 5 points for it. It's extra +1 to hit against aircraft, not flyers, aircraft, but it still hits on 3s, unlike an 8th where it used to hit on 4s. But actually, it hit on 5s if you were moving because it was a heavy weapon and it was hitting ground targets. That's insane. Like, no one would want that. But anyways, let's get into other unit models weapons, and that is the Heavy Plasma Incinerator. Strength 9, 3 damage, -4 AP, -5, and the Heavy Doctrine. It's a great long range, very unreliable unless you have the blast keyword hitting some super durable, heavy infantry. Then you might actually get 6 shots off with it, but it's pretty reliable in the sense that it's at least 1 shot that's super damagey, but in its 36-inch range, so you should be able to get shots off with it, but I'm not 100% relying on a turn 1 to shoot anymore, especially now with the new guidelines. So that's going to be the Storm Strikes. That's their job. They have that reliable hitting on 2s, rerolling one of those big 3 shots. These guys, I want to have at least some heavy long-range firepower, but I also want them to have a lot of light mid-range firepower as well. So the Icarus Rocket Pod, the Onslaught Gatling, and the 2 Storm Bolters in the front there allow this guy to be dynamic. And as an Ultramarine player, being a dead horse here, it needs to be dynamic. But that's the Dreadnought. This is a newbie to the list. Had a lot of fun painting him. This Firstborn here is kind of cool to have a Firstborn unit, but it's I forgot how easy the Stormtalon was to paint. It's been a joy and nice, quick, and easy, but this is going to be a turn 1 Distraction Carnifex. Another reason why we can utilize the Invictors a little bit more conservatively. But it's also going to be an anti-infantry unit. It's got the assault cannons as well as the Skyhammer missile launchers, allowing it to get, I think it's 15 above average anti-infantry shots. It's fast. I can put it in one of my first deployments, allowing me to get long range movement out of it. It's 20-inch minimums, 50 while it's supersonic, giving it -1 to hit. It's toughness 6, so it's actually tougher than the Thunderstrike Storm Speeder at 5 points more only, but it's a Distraction Carnifex. It's also meant to get me engaged in all fronts on turn 1, at least give me that 2 points no matter what, and force my opponent to shoot at something that's -1 to hit, and hopefully get some sort of damage off in the process, or even move block, because you cannot end within an inch if you don't have the fly keyword. It's a pretty big base here. I could really stop my opponent because there's going to be more terrain than ever. If I can fit this in between 2 buildings and move block my opponent, it's a pretty big radius to block them off. So they're going to be flexible. We're going to try to utilize them, and that's why I want them to be in the list. They are a jack-of-all-trades unit, just like everything else we have. And I think with the fly keyword, the aircraft keyword, and everything that goes in with it, I can always equip out las cannons down the road because I didn't glue these bad boys onto it. So pretty excited to check this guy out. If you're still with us, thanks for hanging in there. Finish strong. We're going to get some information, hopefully make us all a little bit better here. So, deployment. One of the very first things that we need to do for this endgame strategy is plan on who we want to be placed first, where, when, and why. And a priority order of such. Have it written down beforehand so you're not trying to do it on the fly, especially when you're on game 3 or game 5 if you're doing a GT. You're just tired of everything in the world. You're barely hanging in there, let alone if you're not even in a top table at the end of it. You've had a lot of losses. You're really not in there. And if you're really trying to make yourself better, this is that moment where you're going to cut above your last version that you brought to the tournament, or if you're going to be stagnant, or hopefully not even worse. So this is going to give you a little bit of a tool and an idea of direction to go. So this blueprint for the end game strategy that I'm utilizing for my army is going to be a deployment first. Who we're going to deploy, why, what, and where. That is going to start off with, actually I have it written down here. That's going to start off with the Intercessors. So Intercessors are going to be the first guys placed down for me. Backfield objective holders. They are going to be the ones that are going to guarantee me, hopefully, 5 points long-term every turn just for holding that objective. The next placement is actually, funny enough, going to be my Stormtalon guy in the back. he has such a long range with his up to 50-inch movement that I can pretty much put him on the other side of the map and still hit almost anything. Because of that fly keyword, I can just move over terrain. But it has to be a minimum of 20, so you're going to have to plan a little bit, because when you do move, you do rotate up to 90 degrees one direction, and then you just shoot forward that direction. So you have to do a little bit of planning, but with very forgiving rules in 9th edition, you're not punished extremely for making a bad move, and you can always fly off the board and come back on the next turn. So aircraft coming in next after the Intercessors. The next unit after that is going to be the Invictor Tactical Warsuit or the Gravis Captain. And the reason for that is going to be the Gravis Captain, like I said earlier, is taking on that dynamic role of both being a support melee beatstick, but as well as a stand-at-home objective holder that's pretty tough and fighty to deal with, that really makes any captain second guess or overcommit on points to kill, because you're not sure if you're going to be able to chew through that 2-up armor on cover with a T5 toughness and 7 wounds and access to 2 stratagems that can buff him defensively. It's a lot of opportunity for the opponent, aka me, to punish the other opponent for dedicating a lot of firepower into it from long range, or just in melee. I mean, it's going to be a tough cookie to crack. So objective holder, for the most part, I think he's going to play. He will also be a supporter and hanging with those dreadnoughts as well, saving CP on Wisdom of the Ancients, and just giving another fork. Let's say I run one Redemptor with the captain going towards an objective this way. I could run the other 2 with Wisdom of the Ancients going the other way. So he could be played in that role as well. The Invictors will be placed around the same time as the Gravis Captain. The main reason for that is that I want to start instilling some sort of urgency in my opponent and start to dominate the table placement arena. You don't want to like get into your head and just throw them right in the front like I've been saying earlier. I did that in the past, and it does have some effectiveness, but to really get use out of that 2 CP stratagem, that really makes the Ultramarines right now, if you ask me, that's their #1 strat, which everyone's kind of getting a little bit of a version of, so hopefully that means that we keep ours, but we'll see. The Redemptors are, just like I said earlier, in that weird spot with the Invictors. So you place your Intercessors, you place your Stormtalon, now you're going to play off your opponent. If they give you a huge infantry unit that has open access, start laying down Invictors right in front of it and force your opponent to respect that. If they don't, which most opponents won't, they understand that you have that power, you start to play in with your Redemptors. Play them in defensively positions that you can hope to move out of and get some shooting, but for the most part, you just want to make sure they're not getting shut off the board by some big turn 1, either shooting or an opponent that can get behind them. So try to get some screening if you can. It's going to be hard with our list. That's one of our weaknesses, but Invictors, then Redemptors, and then we're going to be placing the Stormstrike Thunder Speeders, and whatever their name is, the Thunderstrike Storm Speeders. These bad boys are very flexible in how you place them, and you want to put these right around the same time that you're putting your Redemptors to, in a sense that all 6 of these units, the Thunderstrikes and the Redemptors, can be placed behind cover with the intention of popping out and shooting the next turn. These don't have the benefit of the rapid redeployment, but they have the benefit of a 14-inch movement, so you can hopefully, in the fly keyword, hopefully pop these guys out to great effect, get some shooting off of them. Last but not least, then you're going to be putting your Chaplain. Your Chaplain is going to be the guy that you want to missile, torpedo, Swiss Army knife cut through and throw a monkey wrench into your opponent. He's got a lot of access to stratagems and is his basic skill set. And I didn't say this earlier, but we're also going to be giving him, on top of that Armour Indomitus, we're going to be giving him Paragon of War, which gives him that Ultramarine Warlord trait, giving you, anytime you're in shooting or melee, 6s to wound, do an extra mortal wound in addition to any other damage. So not only is he going to have that, he's also going to have Imperium Sword. So Imperium Sword gives you +1 attack and strength, and lets you reroll charges. It makes him even more deadly when it comes to charges, especially that turn 1 charge, which if you place him last, you have a very high chance of getting off a turn 1 charge, especially if you can reroll that charge. And if you need to, I'm not sure what's past that for charging, you can guarantee it, but for what I'm getting at, he is very flexible in his placement with his high speed mobility. So you want to place him in a place you can get his points back, or at least throw a monkey wrench into your opponent. But that's kind of how we're going to deploy our army here. The next part, we're going to get right back here, is what stratagems we're going to use and why we're going to use them. One of the most important parts of anybody building their list in theory crafting and planning around something strategy-wise for as a captain is stratagems when it comes to 40k. How you're going to use those few CP that you have, or at least for my list, and how are you going to maximize the usage out of those. So myself personally, I like defensive stratagems. I like things that layer upon my durability that I'm already building into. So I have Scions of the Forge, which allows me to operate at a double wound bracket for all my vehicles. I also have a lot of vehicles, so I have a saturation of high toughness and moderately armored vehicles. I also have infantry that are few and far between, so it allows me to utilize the transhuman keyword, as well as the Gravis Captain, unyielding in the face of the foe keyword, and the Armor of Indomitus, once per game 3+ invuln, makes him in particularly durable, and all of them can touch cover except for the bike. You can't touch cover and then get the benefits of light cover, but either way, everybody in the list is durable. The chapter tactic, if they're a vehicle, makes them even more durable, and the stratagems I like to pick layer upon that. So I like transhuman for these guys. I like unyielding the face of the foe. I like skilled riders for the biker if I'm advancing. A lot of times I'll be advancing turn 1 with the chaplain. I like to get him past that midpoint, getting me engaged on all fronts, possibly landing on an objective at the same time. In doing so, not only is that putting a target right in front of my enemy to shoot, you know, here's a nice big juicy character with 2 warlord traits and a relic, please shoot at him. That is a bad move on their part, because then I can pop skilled riders, making it -1 to hit, and transhuman, and I'll pop that once per phase per game 3+ invul, and depending on what I need, I might not even need to do all of that. So you can really punish your opponent and lay down as much as you need to, or you can, you know, just do a couple of those stratagems and really, you know, buff him just a little bit. But there's different choices you have. I think another good defensive stratagem that you can use would be the reroll saves, especially in particular for this guy. When he has that 3+ invuln and you're right in the opponent's face and you're forcing him to attack him, keep him alive. Even if it's just 1 wound, this guy can rip off a lot of damage to almost anybody in the game, especially if he just mantra and his charge off on the same turn. He can have a strength 8 weapon with, I believe, 3 damage and -2 AP in the Assault Doctrine, and that's 7 attacks hitting on 2, rerolling 1 of them. So that's pretty awesome. So, and Paragon of War giving you any of those 6s to wound, mortal wound, plus he has an Absolver pistol, as well as twin bolters on the front, so you get chances to do range damage on top of everything else. So he's just a good character overall. Kind of drawing into the chaplain at the moment, but other defensive stratagems that you can use, defensive focus. I've actually used it a couple times and won the game at least one of those times, but a couple of times they were still very effective. It just all depends on what you're shooting at and how many units you have. Typically, you have to have at least 2 Redemptors with a reroll aura on. If you don't have that, I wouldn't even run it past anything else. But that's just that. I mean, 3 Invictors as well would be another one. 2 Invictors plus another unit that's randomly thrown in there. Granted, most of the time you're using the extra Overwatch, which is an extra CP, but they're worth it because you're trying to keep these guys alive, especially these Redemptors. And these Redemptors with the Wisdom of the Ancients stratagem, which is another great one we're going to want to use almost every turn if possible, just to prevent mortal wounds to these guys, or inflicting a wound on themselves. I'm not sure if that is a mortal wound, but I don't know. There's a lot of, speaking of mortal wounds on vehicles, Armor of Contempt, another defensive stratagem to keep these guys alive if possible. And speaking of walkers, Redemptor and the Invictor are 2 great candidates for fallback and re-engage. Yet another amazing stratagem for the Ultramarines, specific to only us. It's 2 CP as a successor, but it's still well worth it to get what you do out of it. So, a lot of great stratagems right there. Those are the big ones I wanted to use. Also, 1 CP, you can either put a Redemptor or an Invictor into reserves. I'd always put a Redemptor if I was going to do that. 1 CP, not a bad idea though. Put that guy into a safety, for at least until turn 2, and then come out and start whooping ass. But those are the stratagems we want to use. We want to be very selective. We want to use 5 turn 1, so save 2 for rerolls. I'm going to use 2 for the redeploy. I'm going to use another one for Wisdom of the Ancients. That's 5 off the rip. Not too many. Leaves me some to play with turns 2, 3, and 4. I'm not all in like I used to be in past list. But those are the big points I wanted to share about the command roles. We're gonna get into some weaknesses and strength overall with the list, things to watch out for, and then we'll finish up here. Okay, so now we need to get into one of the more nitty-gritty aspects of this list. That is how you're going to score those secondary and primary points. How are we going to achieve those victory points and outscore our opponent? So the big thing with 9th edition, different than 8th, is that it's not just about killing your opponent off or getting more victory points than your opponent so you win. It's about getting more victory points than your opponents, plural, in the tournament when you're coming to the competitive scene, when it's talking about ITC games. So you want to be able to maximize your victory points for yourself per game, also in that point differential between your opponent, by also minimizing the amount of points your opponent gets as well. Because that opponent that you may beat turn 1 by 5 points was a close victory for you, they completely maximize their points in their next 2 games. And even though you win your next 2 games, if there were still close wins for you, that opponent might, because they had such a huge point differential, might come out ahead of you in the tournament. Even though you have 3 wins, they have 2 losses, and they have more victory points than you. I believe that's why there was a particular player that recently got some flack in the competitive scene, is because he kind of sandbagged and lost, or he won but sandbagged his points or something. I'm not quite sure, but it was something along those lines. I would never try to play the game because you're just going to get shot in the foot. You play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes kind of thing. But at the end of the day, our big secondaries that we want to go for are engage in all fronts and grind them down. We are a very killy army with about an average to below average unit count, so we should be able to kill more than we have, especially with a way above average durability. So, and with that above average mobility as well, with our storm speeders, the bike captain, the Stormtalon in the back here, all allow us to get that turn 1 at least 2 points, but possibly even 3 points for engage in all fronts, allowing our opponent to know that we're there to play on turn 1 and on, and ready to score those points right off the rip. So that's the big ones we want to go for. The ones that I'm not sure about for the other third secondary to pick, I would either go for the map specific one. I would really, for myself, I'm trying to teach myself as many of them as possible, so if I do land on one, maybe I can maximize that in some way. But really, maybe slay the Warlord just to get some 6 points. It's that third one kind of hurts me right now, and that is one of the weaknesses of this list, but is that third secondary position for this list. But let's get into some other weaknesses. Obviously, the big one in the room is mortal wounds and a psychic phase. Obviously, we have Armor of Contempt, but that's 1 defensive stratagem per phase per, turn, I guess, or whatever, but it's not that much. It's very 5-up, feel no pain against what sometimes might be 3 mortal wounds, and you just waste the CP to do it. Sometimes they're the focal point, they're about to get hit with a lot of mortal wounds, or they get a D6 explosion from a Land Raider or some Repulsor Executioner, and then they roll 6 mortal wounds or a Super Smite, and then it's worth it. Absolutely worth it to do the 5-up, feel no pain, Armor of Contempt. But you want to be aware of the Psychic phase against opponents that have a very strong showing of it. That's a big weakness. Arbor the Witch. There's a good secondary to pick if you don't abhor the Witch. Sorry, not Arbor. I think Arbor means to harbor them, but either way. Abhor the Witch is a great one because you don't have any Psychers in your list and you don't have any anti-denies, anything, so it's a good one to take. The other big weakness that we need to address and be aware of moving forward as a shooting army, and any shooting army for that matter, not just the Ultramarines, is the fact that the board itself is going to be an enemy for us. There's going to be more and more terrain on that board than there ever has been before. It's good for the game. I said that overall earlier, and I think that it's great to not only add a layer of complexity for newbies and veterans, but it adds an even playing field, or a little bit more of an even playing field for everybody involved. So, the fact of the matter is, I would expect to see more terrain. How do we address that as a mainly shooting army? Mobility. We're going to play into the mobility of this list that we already had before. So we had 2 Storm Speeders before, now we're going to add in a 3rd. That's even more units that can fly into a lane of firing and pop off some super long 36 or 48-inch range shots. Redemptors, not same story. These guys before I'd put on the front line, and I would move them 8 inches to almost always getting line of fire. Now I'm going to be behind a building, and if I'm lucky, doing that same story, but I'm not planning on it. There's going to be more terrain than ever, so it's going to be harder and harder to get that turn 1 points out of shooting out of this guy, so I'm not going to plan on it. I'm planning on keeping him alive. That's the new plan for him. Invictors already didn't care about the heavy terrain boards because pre-deployment kind of negated that. Especially a 10-inch movement, their movement doesn't hurt them as much as the Redemptors does. On top of that, we also added in the Bike Captain. Bike Captain gives us 20-inch movement, 14 without the turbo boost. I can get him to where he needs to be to maybe peel off somebody from a midfield objective to get around that extra terrain where I can't maybe shoot them off. This guy can just go there on foot, or bike, I should say, and peel that guy off. But that is one of our biggest weaknesses, other than obvious choices like the high AP, high multi-damage weaponry from like Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, Admech armies, Drakari armies, as well as Psychic armies like Thousand Suns and Grey Knights, who can mortal wound us to death because we're just such high single count models with no mortal wound saves other than that one Armor of the Contempt stratagem. But those are the big weaknesses. Let's get into the strengths and finish this video up. Before we finish off the video, I want to go over a few strengths of the list. One of them is that we actually have a lot of anti-aircraft firepower here, which is kind of cool. The Stormtalon has Skyhammer missiles, which are +1 to hit. The Redemptors have Icarus rocket pods, which are +1 to hit against aircraft. And the Thunderstrike Storm Speeders each have 2 Icarus rocket pods per unit, giving you 6 more weapons with +1 to hit against aircraft. Nothing too crazy, but it does give you an edge against crazy lists like the NIDS Harridan list. Some Harridan lists even have 2 Harridans, so it's nice to have all that extra +1 to hit across the board. Oversaturation of it and whatnot. Admech lists have a lot of flyers, Drakari lists have a lot of flyers, some Space Marine lists have a lot of flyers, but just a nice little edge. Nothing too crazy, just like a Bore the Witch against Psyker armies. Another strength that we have is we're above average shooting on not only infantry, but heavy armor and light armor. So we're not really afraid too much of what we face. We should have the potential to always take down that opponent, no matter if he is a horde, elite, or a very high armor army. But those are the strengths, those are the weaknesses. I don't know how much more I can go into this list. That's why this is part 3 and the final part. But if you stuck with us to the end, I appreciate you stopping out. Please leave a comment, let me know that you made it all the way. And, you know, start some good discussions and we'll talk up some Space Marines and whatnot. But thanks for stopping out, and we'll catch everybody on the flip side here.